This is a podcast for 2025 from Lee Jones. Gathering Marbles, number 1. The Palisades. Several of my older acquaintances are in the process of losing their marbles. Some are losing their words, others their short-term memory. Some are just sort of glazing over. Slates are slowly being wiped clean. Etch-a-sketches are failing. Snow globes clouding up. I can't tell you how many times over the years I've been urged to write a song about that, whatever that might be. People want topical songs, inspiring songs, funny songs, edgy songs, songs of reminiscence. In fact, I spent decades checking off one or another of those boxes, composing reasonably tight songs, recording them, attempting to distribute the tracks on cassette back in the day, and then wondering what exactly had been the point. Don't get me wrong, I had a fine time. Music totally saved my life. And as one of my favorite rejection letters from Bomp Records back in the late 70s so sweetly put it, we suggest you send your music to your mom and be happy she loves you. So people tell me I should write a song about this and that. And for the past 15 years, my response has been, why don't you write one? Speaking of crotchety old men, seems like you can't swing a dead cat around here without hitting a cancer patient. I'm one. I have 4+ years under my belt at this point. And we continue to fight the ever-mutating advances of this insidious menace, metastatic, invasive squamous cell carcinoma. My cancer story will unfurl in these pages in a leisurely fashion. It's a harrowing tale, mainly, thus far. But some people tell me it's also inspirational, among other things. And so I'll write some of the best bits out. As I understand it, I'm speaking on behalf of some who really don't want to talk about it. So that's cool because I like to yak. Parts of my cancer story will be instructive to some. And so I'll include a My Cancer Story table of contents for those who, just for instance, want to jump straight to the juicy stuff. Like, let me tell you about this nephrologist, a kidney doctor, whose care I endured during the first 2 years following my cancer diagnosis, who wanted me above all else to die with a healthy kidney. But let's hang on here because the bigger story, the woo-woo story, the one I'm attempting to unfold here in a relatable way, reaches way beyond music and cancer and getting second opinions. It's about getting better. Sheldon Lee Jones turned 17 years old in Pacific Palisades, California in 1972. Our family of 4 lived in a cozy 3-bedroom house in the decidedly middle-class part of town on Radcliffe Avenue. My friend Liz and I used to make out in the ivy in front of our house when I was in about the 4th grade, which put Liz in the 3rd. We were great pals. Liz's family lived across the street on the very edge of Temescal Canyon. Radcliffe Avenue was the closest street running sort of parallel to the drop-off into Temescal. And when we were kids, only coastal sage, which is highly aromatic, lizards, raccoon, deer, scrub oaks, the creek and the canyon itself were found down there. We may touch on poison oak in the section about bad decisions, but why bother? If you know, you know. Eucalyptus thrived in the alley that ran behind our house. Eucalyptus trees generate a bounty of aromas. These trees are tall and brittle with bark that peels off in crusty strips and with long, pointy, pale gray-green leaves, and they smell so nice. I tried not to step on the little pyramid-shaped seeds because I generally went barefoot, but Billy tells me that they wafted like mad when you stomped on them. The hotter the day, the punchier the smell. That's probably true of most things in the natural world. Older kids had built what we called forts up in these trees further down the alley. Platforms with no walls, just places to be higher up. And one day this German consulate's kid, and my best friend at the time, Albert, skipped the second half of a fourth grade school day with me to play hooky. And we spent the afternoon reading books up in the fort. I was reading Tom Sawyer or something similarly revolutionary. It was uncanny how my mom and the principal knew where to find us. Ice plant also has a unique smell, also impossible to describe, except maybe that it smells cool and crisp. Ice plant is like a mega succulent. Given the chance, it will cover sunny hillsides, but is not something one would choose to lounge around nor make out in. Can't say why exactly. It might be because it breaks so easily. It's fragile. Ice plant busts out with these amazing blue-purple sort of hairy blossoms with yellow creamy stamens flashing to lure in potential pollinators. We would snap the juicy fat leaves, kind of like breaking open a pickle, just to see all that water stored so weirdly inside. Wild anise or fennel are the fancy names for what we called licorice, a feathery, aromatic, vaguely sweet, edible weed that grew in a few spots in the alley. You could eat a handful of that green stuff in a pinch, and it was tasty and bright in your mouth. Then there's boxwood. We had a boxwood hedge in our front yard. English boxwood smells exactly like dog piss. Once again, I think it's the SoCal heat. Maybe it smells less terrible in England. It would have to. But a giant boxwood topiary of a dog pissing on an English boxwood is really too good an idea. Speaking of trimming the verge, my best friend for a few years was Randy. We made money by mowing our neighbors' lawns as a team, so the paired fumes of lawnmower engines and fresh-cut grass often filled our nostrils. Randy was always more into making money than I was, and still is, speaking of green stuff. Getting back to the English ivy, it's non-native, and considered an invasive species in gardening circles. The Ivy Leagues are so named because the campuses of Princeton, Yale, and even the green pastures of Harvard have long since been overrun by the hateful weed. English ivy doesn't smell like much until you start trimming it, at which point it issues sort of an earthy, spicy, but not refined or nuanced stink. In both senses of the word, it's just kind of gross. My first older brother, Greg, and I spent maybe 6 consecutive weekends one spring helping our dad, who we called Pop, hack loose and bundle up an 18-inch thick mop top of ivy off of the hillside bordering our front yard. Pop paid us for the labor beyond our normal meager allowances, which helped not one bit. This experience with the forced labor and the cursed ivy haunted both of us, Greg and me, well into the subsequent century. This was the ivy where Liz and I, on a brown army blanket, used to make out. Liz had a friend named Lynn who seemed to like me. And this had to be during the fall of my junior year at Palisades High. I had a small Honda motorcycle at that point, so I was just over 15. By this time in my life, I had become aware that my naturally eccentric and occasionally exuberant personality was locked inside a robotic shell. Seriously, I recognized that I was trapped. My folks had been Depression-era kids who never broached touchy topics like feelings, dreams, or fears. My brother Greg was Mr. Repression, and I was this goofy, gangly, big-headed cyclone of self-conscious hyper-awareness. I could draw, I could sing, I was tall, I could play sports well, I could play chess, I could pass classes without ever doing any work. I was younger than my classmates, I wasn't bad looking, and I was bored senseless. Of course I was going to get into drugs. Before we go there, let's just get this one point out of the way. I was also a total prude. Do people still use that word? The idea of getting physical with a girl beyond kissing was so alien to me that, given several chances over the next few years, I whiffed on all of them. I didn't even know I was whiffing. I didn't know anything about anything. None of my friends did either. Who are these geeks? My brother was a virgin until he was 22. I'm just inventing that number, as sex didn't actually come up in discussion at any time ever in our stiff little world. He might have been 30. So he was no help. Mom and Pop were in no way affectionate with one another that I could see. We four were just a highly functional little family of automatons getting things done. Now, I absolutely loved stealing looks at and foldouts from Playboy magazine. There were no problems with the plumbing, all good on that front. But bridging the gulf between Miss October and Liz's friend Lynn, the schematics did not exist. So eventually, I kissed Lynn once and then famously pronounced, "Now you know how it feels to kiss a robot." That was it, my little cry for help. And Liz turned around and made fun of me after hearing about it from Lynn. Oh, swell. Only 2 years of high school to go.